friends, welcome back to another video. So I thought it'd be fun today to kind of revisit something that I did for a few videos back, which is another kind of OC reference sheet. So in the past, I've done one for Maseki. As you can see, this is kind of what the format I ended up doing for the reference sheets. I've also done one for Kaisen and Akemi, but I thought it'd be fun to do a different character of mine, which is Moriko. So to kind of give you guys a little bit of background information about the format of my reference sheets, I never could keep up, nor did I really enjoy making reference sheets that were very, I don't know, like planned out in a certain way where things look a little bit too static, or like, you know, if you're doing like flats, or you have to make sure to include the full body and all that. So I wanted to make it a little bit more loose for myself and fun, but also be able to add as many reference sheets to my existing one as I possibly can by keeping somewhat of a same format. So for my previous ones that I did for the other three boys, basically what I wanted to do is similar to my sketch page style, where I have kind of like one in focus kind of drawing, and then surrounding that drawing would be just like random doodles, or it could be unfinished, or they could be more polished depending on how I feel that day. But also kind of like the background and stuff, I want to be able to like swap out any of the, I guess, like quote unquote pages for my reference sheet, so that like if I feel like I want to add a certain reference sheet with the main one, I can, or I can exclude the main one, make a new one. It won't look too inconsistent. So I wanted to keep the format for all of my OCs. So the OC we're talking about today, like I mentioned earlier, is my OC Moriko. So Moriko is probably technically out of my official OCs, she's the latest one. I'm not going to be including Akemi siblings because I'm still on the fence about like how I want their design to be, their names, and their just like overall design and stuff. So even though I made a video about them, it still could change, and obviously the more I draw them, it will change to fit what I naturally feel like will fit them the best, as well as like what I will make out of like shorthand versions of how I draw them and all that. So I just need to find some time to draw them out more to see how comfortable I can draw them. So Moriko has been given similar, not a grace period, but they had a better time in terms of like when they were made, similar to Kaisen. So as soon as Kaisen and Moriko were introduced, I started drawing them a lot more compared to, let's say, Sato and Akemi, or even Koji. So Moriko's been given like a better treatment at this point, so I've been having more fun drawing her anyways. So before we get into talking too much about Moriko first, I want to talk a little bit more about the procedure that we're going to be doing. So all of my reference sheet videos that I've done for my OCs for Maseki, Kaisen, and Akemi, I've always done 2 sheets for them. But this time I'm going to show you guys mostly footage from one, so that I can kind of keep it condensed and it's not going to be as many choppy footage. So you'll see the second one here and there, and I'll show it mostly at the very end so that you guys can see it. And I think it's just like better as more like a surprise rather than seeing itty bitty parts every so often of each of the pages, and I don't have to flip back and forth between the sketching phases, the coloring phase, and then like the cleaning up phase. So to start off, it's basically those 3 steps. I'm starting off with the sketch, and after I finish the sketch, I will color and do like all my rough coloring, the background color, all that. And then we will kind of adjust our lines a little bit. So most likely I'll lock my sketch, and then we'll change the colors to fit appropriately. And then I will start to really clean up everything afterwards. So moving along to my OC Moriko, she was actually made from, I guess like, I wasn't planning on making her technically. So I think at the beginning of this year, I think it's in February, I made a video making a P-Crew kind of setup so that you guys could use that format. Or if you're not familiar with P-Crew, basically it's kind of like a image maker kind of thing, like a character maker, where people would upload images that you can use parts of to create an entire OC. And my OC Selwyn, technically, who a lot of people don't know about, was made from my friend's template alongside with a P-Crew. So because of that, I kind of got interested in how to make a P-Crew. So I went through all the time to make one, make all the assets and everything. And at the very end when I was like testing it out and trying the different combinations, I did stumble upon this particular design, which I'll put on the screen right here. And this is kind of like the very start of kind of like the rough base for Moriko. So eventually I ended up changing her color palette a lot, a little bit of her skin tone, the way I styled her hair as well. Also, this is footage from the second sketch page that I ended up doing for Moriko, so hopefully you guys can kind of see it, because I don't really show the coloring phase. I'll show it probably at the end where I start to do the white outlines around every wing. But other than that, let's focus on this particular sheet. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch the line colors and clean up a little bit after I do the colors, and then we can go into my normal kind of rendering cleanup phase. But that one image from the P crew evolved into me drawing her kind of like a more finished drawing. And then after that, whenever I doodled her and I finally gave her a name and everything, I believe her name is Forest Child. So that's kind of like the theme that I went with, because she has a lot of more darker greens, she has a little bit more black, and then she has very light green eyes. So I thought it kind of fit more of like that mysterious forest kind of vibe. So that's what her name is based off of. And then I started to draw her a lot more, and I really liked her color combination and all that, and just general character. So she is basically the character that I would say is best friends with Sato, so I often draw them together a lot as well. Now, as I talk about any of my OCs, usually nothing's like super concrete, because I don't really have the time and effort, or I guess like the need quite yet, to make a actual full story for them. So there's probably going to be a lot of plot holes, or like things that I might change in the future if I need it to fit the particular setting or plot that I actually want the story to go into. But right now, Moriko is, I think she's going to be like a year older than Sato and Akemi. So Akemi and Sato are around 18 years old. Moriko will be around 19. Then we have Masaki, who's 21, and then I have Kaisen at 23. So, oh, and then obviously Koji, but he's like 12, 13-ish. So he's like starting middle school is the age for him. But everyone else is kind of like adult and older, I guess. But for Moriko, because I think a lot of you guys ship her with Kaisen, because maybe, I don't know if it's because they came around the same time, or it's that one drawing that I drew of Kaisen on the back of her motorbike or her motorcycle, which I think a lot of you guys found very cute. So at this moment, Moriko is nobody's love interest in the story of my current OCs, and she's not like planned to be with any of them. Same with kind of like Masaki and Kaisen as well. Masaki and Kaisen are friends, and Moriko's kind of like in their circle of friends as well, and she often hangs out with Kaisen and Masaki as well as Sato and Akemi. So she kind of bridges the gap a little bit, because I didn't really think of a way of how Sato and Kaisen would interact as much, and same with like just the three boys. So if I did Masaki, Kaisen, and Akemi, but I like having Moriko be able to hop between the two groups for now. And then, yeah, I don't know, I find her easier to make interactions with, but I'll definitely draw all of my OCs interacting with the other person. Actually, yeah, I think I have an idea for that, which could be fun to do, but I think it might take a little while. So maybe I'll start planning after I finish this voiceover. So in terms of like personality, I feel like she's gonna be like very easygoing, very bubbly, very easily excitable, that kind of type of character. So she's very much like a person who loves to do activities, goes out, maybe does like hiking, biking, all that stuff. She likes the frill. So yeah, I thought she'd be just a fun character to have, especially with my current cast of OCs, because I think most of them are very mellow-ish. I guess like Koji's an exception and Sato's an exception, but my other three boys are like, they're more low-key if anything, in terms of like energy-wise, I feel like. But in terms of what I changed from Moriko's previous design when I made her first in P Crew, and then the illustration that I ended up making of her after making the P Crew. So instead of like keeping her top, or like the tank top part kind of like white, I ended up going with more of a black and green combination for her overall color palette. Also, kind of like the step that I'm working on in terms of what I'm doing on the screen, I am going ahead and alpha locking my sketch and changing the kind of like the sketch color to match closer with the rest of the objects around. I'm also going ahead and using the eraser tool to erase any of the stray lines so that we have an easier time adjusting and cleaning up everything once we start getting there. So it just makes it a little bit easier so that I don't have to worry about always constantly changing the line work. But I feel like for the overall all the drawings that I ended up doing for both this page and the second page, I did use a lot more of black, I guess, to outline a lot of the objects and stuff. One, for the contrast, and then two, I don't know if it was just easier for me to do the cleanup, but it also just looked nicer because things look a little bit more bold and kind of in your face so that things don't look too washed out. I think out of all my sketch pages, Kaisen's probably my favorite, but Masaki I'm still planning on probably redoing once again. I feel like for him, because he's my favorite OC, I struggle to enjoy any of the reference sheets that I make of him. But that's kind of like the fun part of this whole entire process, because I'll just do another sheet and see if I like that more than the second sheet that I ended up doing for Masaki, and I can always like interchangeably swap them in and out for if I ever want to commission somebody. So yeah. But since we're doing Moriko's eyes right now, her eyes are a much lighter green. I think I ended up making her eyes a little bit on the warmer side compared to how they were initially. So compared to Masaki's green eyes, which I feel like his are pretty standard in terms of like the type you would see usually in like anime characters that have green eyes, they're a bit kind of on the mid-tone side, very just like bright green. But for Moriko, I wanted to be on more of like the pastel kind of faded side. But I was still debating on whether or not her, I guess like the pupil, and I'm taking like kind of creative liberties here, whether or not I want it to be fairly dark or if I wanted to keep them on the lighter side too, to give the overall eye a very light kind of faded look. But in the end, I ended up putting back in the darker pupil so that it doesn't look too out of place. So hopefully it still reads as a fairly light colored eye color for her design, because basically, her eye color established the color scheme that I kind of wanted for her entire design. So accompanied with the kind of warmer selection of her darker hair, which is, compared to Kaisen, I tend to draw towards like purples and blues for his hair, even though his hair is black. Obviously, it's going to depend on the situation, but oftentimes when I'm doing the highlights or if I'm doing just general lighting, I tend to put purple and blue into his hair. So for Moriko, I tend to put brown as well as like a muted green. So it does still lean towards more of that green shade anyways, but her hair is technically black. So I mentioned earlier that I ended up changing her tank top color. So she does wear a kind of thin strapped spaghetti, well, I guess kind of like a spaghetti strap-ish kind of crop top, alongside with kind of a biker leather jacket, which is slightly cropped as well. So for her, I always wanted her to have kind of like that motorbike kind of esque look. So I ended up looking at some jackets. I wish I looked up at a few more because I definitely don't think I drew any of the jackets correctly in any of the iterations that I do today. So maybe in the future I'll draw one that's more accurate, but she does own a motorbike and she does use that to get around here and there. And I thought it would just be fun because one, I don't draw a lot of like motor vehicles, and technically I don't plan to, but I would like to if I end up drawing Moriko more and more. So in the future, we'll do some studies of it, because obviously mechanical things are a little bit of a nightmare for myself because I don't do a lot of technical drawings as much anymore, but it could be fun to do with some pen and just like really figure out the shapes and components and parts into it. Then I can just like better draw it for Moriko in the future. I'm trying to think what else I wanted to talk about. Oh, I guess like her overall color scheme, like I mentioned. So black hair, she has lighter pastel green eyes. She has a mintier top for her crop top. I ended up not going with the same color as her eyes. I don't really like relying too much on the eye color for the entirety of the color scheme, if that makes sense. So for Kaisen, I do pull a lot of the blue from his eyes for the highlights and accent colors for his hair, but blue is not really present anywhere else in his color scheme. He leans towards more of a maroon or sometimes like a purple color. And then for Masaki doesn't really have any green in his outfit. He has turquoise, he has a light blue as well. And then Akemi has orange in his shirt, but his eye color is more of a yellow. Sato is probably the only exception. Even her eye color is a little bit more greenish compared to her overall color scheme. So I tried to make sure the eye color kind of fits the color scheme, but I don't want that color to be present as much in other places because I don't want things to be too matchy, if that makes sense. So I did offset her color of her shirt a little bit from her eye color, and then we made her pants kind of like a dark green. And I was gonna go gray, but I think it would have been too monochromatic for my taste, even though like you could argue that her current color palette is very monochromatic because this is mostly black and green, which is just a bunch of different shades of green basically. So yeah, I do think overall her color scheme as well as her design is not going to be changed or tweaked all that much, other than like actual accuracy of their clothing, because the pants are like loosely based off of, I think it's tech wear pants. I forget where I've seen it, but ever since I drew the one VTuber model for my friend and she had like a very specific type of pants that she wanted for her VTuber, I was kind of like more interested in that type of stuff. So hers is roughly based off of what my friend ended up giving me for reference at the time. And then let's see. Yeah, in terms of my girls, so I only have Sato and Moriko currently, and I've drawn Moriko the most, to the point where Sato's design I'm still iffy about. I think it's like mostly her default, so I think most people have like default looks for their OCs so that you can keep things like canonically accurate or like, you know, consistent. But Sato's like current hairstyle where it's like pulled to one side, tied up in kind of like a loop, I don't know if I like it as much. Every time I draw her hair like completely down or styled like in braids or in like buns or anything like that, I tend to like it a little bit more. But I feel like personality wise, she would probably do like the looped bun thing more often. And that's actually a habit from myself. So I don't know if I talked about this too much. A lot of my current OCs, so let's say Maseki, Kaisen, Moriko, Sato, Akemi, and Koji, technically are based around little parts of my old OCs that I had in high school and middle school. So I definitely think that Kaisen resembles the most towards one of my old OCs that I had in the past. And then personality wise, I think Maseki resembles my old favorite OC. So maybe I'll do a video talking and comparing them and seeing how my change in taste maybe throughout the years, as well as like what didn't really change, because I feel like my preference and characters still are pretty much the same. I tend to like more like comfort characters where they're more sweet or calm, that type of person. Or I like the ones that have like a lot of gap moe. Maybe that's the only thing that changed, but yeah, I don't know. I'll talk about that in a future video, I think. So kind of hopping back to the actual video footage, I ended up mostly putting, I guess, like the majority of my effort into the larger Moriko. So similar to the other formats of the previous reference sheets that I made for my OCs in the past, the first page will definitely have their name, usually a larger headshot of the OC so that you can kind of see their face and their hair more accurately. And then I will have a full body chibi somewhere on that page as well, and then just a bunch of different versions which are kind of like doodle-esque into the background. And then after that, we can go ahead and add like a white outline. I forgot to add the grid pattern for Moriko as well. And I kind of have like the standard looking manila color that I ended up using for all of them, so I'm gonna use that as well for Moriko. But for the second sheet, I kind of allow myself to do a full body version of the character alongside with at least one waist up, and then anything else is kind of like free reign. But that way I can kind of get a good range of types of reference for my character. I want to at least have one that's like mostly focused on their face and then one that's focused on the full body. So usually between the two reference sheets that I end up doing, it will cover my bases for the most part. I don't really do like any turnarounds. I also forgot to do a profile version for Moriko. I don't remember fully if Masaki and I think Akemi has one. I don't even know if Kaisen has one, but I should really include the side profiles for both of them. I think like side profiles and like the back side is usually helpful for people who want to be able to decipher their hair and be able to draw their hair a little bit more accurately from different angles. But I was gonna say my like the hair for my OCs are not too complicated. I don't think a lot of them make a lot of sense anyways, but I kind of have fun with it. I think Kaisen has like a little strand of hair that I always draw out of frame, not frame, out of sight, no matter what angle. So it might be annoying to draw, but I feel like that's what I want to do for him all the time. So it's probably not that big of a deal. Moriko has her hair kind of like pulled back a little bit, or like I guess like pushed back, not pulled back, over her hair. But I would love to draw one where her hair is like completely down alongside with all of my other OCs, because majority of them have their hair styled in a particular way where there's like what is it called? Like their hair bangs-ish area is like pushed up, meaning that if they got doused with water, it'd most likely come all the way down. And I would like to style their hair so that you guys can see what it looks like when it's like completely down. I think it would be kind of cute to do, and just like a good exercise for me to interpret their hair in a different way. For the text, so text is what I usually do in this very similar procedure. So you write it out, you duplicate it, you then after that kind of Gaussian blur it, use the automatic selection tool. The Gaussian blur will make the selection kind of like hover around your text, and then that way you can kind of have an outline. You can invert the selection and then fill the selection so that you can kind of get a nice even outline around your text. After that, I went ahead and ended up doing all the white outlines for my second page. So I do this just to make sure that some of the details don't get lost in between certain characters. Similar to like Kaisen, Moriko has a darker color palette in terms of her clothing. So if I draw maybe her hair next to one of the jackets or whatever, then sometimes it might get lost. So adding a white little outline around everything just makes everything pop and stand out, which I think looks kind of cute anyways. So this is the second page, and then we'll quickly go back into our first page, which is right here. And I did end up having to copy and paste this one onto the second page so that I could accurately get the colors for everything. But after that, we'll go through the actual time lapse, which I will have the clean version at the very end if you're interested. But Moriko has always been one of the characters that have been very easy for me to draw. Her hair is a little bit similar to both Kaisen and Masaki in a way, so maybe that's why it makes it a little bit easier for me to draw her on the spot. And then we have the second page's little time lapse, which I feel like is a little bit more interesting because you guys didn't really see the process for this. So a full body on the very left, then I have kind of like my waist up-ish version, or just a version that does like includes more of the body in a larger scale. And then you can see that I pasted the old sketch version from the first page as a reference for all the colors, because I noticed if you open a picture as like the reference, its colors gets a little bit more muted and darker, so it doesn't really work in my favor. But hopefully you guys enjoyed watching me draw and hear a little bit more about Moriko. I'll try to talk about her more in the future, but for now, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!